This video describes how to use dialogues in Windows Form applications. Here is the outline of the video. First, I'm going to introduce standard dialogues which are predefined and exist already. You just need to use them. We have multiple different standard dialogues like color dialog, folder browser dialog, font dialog, and so on. And also I'll show you how to create your own custom dialog using button.dialog result property and also form.accept button property and also form.cancel button property. Let's say you want to use one of the standard dialogs that exist in Windows Forms shipped with them. Let's say you want to use color dialog, which is a dialog that allows the user to select a specific color. There are multiple ways of creating a color dialog. The easiest, the most straightforward way is to just go to the event handler of a certain buttons click event and write this code. Let's say I'm going to have a color dialog with the name DLG. Let's create a new instance of color dialog. This already exists, so you need to just instantiate from it. And then we can set the dialog color equal to whatever you want. Let's say the red color. That's going to be the initial color of the dialog. Then you're going to use the show dialog method of the dialog in order to show the dialog to the user and let the user pick whatever color they want. They can either keep the same red color or they can change it to any other color they want. And then they're going to either press OK on the dialog or they're going to press cancel. I'll show you an example of how it looks like in the next slides, but just to give you a complete example here, if the result that the show dialog returns is equal to OK, which means if the user have pressed OK at the end of the color selection procedure, then you're going to basically use the dialog color for whatever reason you want. This example is just wants to use that pick color to open a message box and say you picked that color, right? So it's nothing here, it's just this message box that show you picked the color that you picked. And if you press cancel, this code is not going to be executed because this code is inside the if statement. So if the dialog result is equal to dialog result of cancel, then nothing's going to happen. There's another way of using the standard dialogs, and that would be navigate them or search for them in the toolbox, drag them, and drop them on your form when you're designing your form. They're not going to stay on the form with a certain symbol. They're going to be placed in the invisible tray at the bottom of the form that you're designing, but it doesn't matter, like they exist, you can use them. After you drop a dialog, a standard dialog, let's say the color dialog from the toolbox and place it in your form, you will going to have access to it. All you need to do is let's say call the show dialog on it. So assume that you have created a dialog, a color dialog by dropping it on your form. All you need to do is to say color dialog.show dialog, and this is going to return a value, a dialog result value. If it's equal to OK, then you can just do the same thing. Let's say you use a message box.show to show a message box saying that you picked this color. This slide basically illustrates how the dialog looks like. Let's say when you click on this button, the event handler of this button basically uses the show dialog on the color dialog object that you dropped on your form, and then this will appear. and then you can either keep the red color, let's say, or let's say select this color by clicking on it, and then press OK. After you press OK, then the show dialog is going to return dialog result.OK. Or if you don't like any of the colors, you can click on this button, which is define custom colors, and then use RGB format to pick whatever color you want with whatever red, green, and blue intensity that you're looking for. And then you can press OK if you want to finalize your selection, or you can click on cancel, or you can click on this button, and in both cases your selection is not going to be saved by the application. Here is a similar example. Assume that you have dragged the folder browser dialog from toolbox and dropped it on your form, and by clicking on this button you have called the show dialog on an object folder browser dialog that you dropped on your form. And when you do that, then this dialog will show up on the screen, and the user has the chance of browsing in their file system and pick whatever folder they want, or if they cannot find it here, they can make a new folder, and then either they place OK or cancel, and this way they can either finalize their selection or they can cancel their selection. The main form or the host form will find out what the decision of the user is based on the return value of the show dialog method, which is going to be either the dialog result.OK or dialog result.cancel. Here is another example of creating a standard dialog and using it. In this case, we have used font dialog, and clicking on this button will basically call the show dialog of the font dialog, and this will pop up. Again, all you need to do, search for font dialog in the toolbox, drag it, and drop it in your form. This is another example. Open file dialog. If you add this dialog, this standard dialog to your form, you can basically use the show dialog to open it, and then the dialog like this will show up, and then you can basically browse your whole file system and pick whatever file you want, and then either press open or press cancel. Open is going to finalize your selection and confirms your selection, otherwise press cancel. Of course, you can organize things or create new folder while you're looking for your file. There is another standard dialog called save file dialog, which can be added to your form, and when you use the show dialog method of it, you will see a form like this, which allows the user to save a file with a certain name and with a certain type in any directory or any folder that they want. They can browse the whole file system and pick the right location, and then they can choose the right name, and then they can press the save button if they want to finalize their selection, or they can pick the cancel button if they don't want to finalize their selection. There are three separate standard dialogs related to printing documents. This is the very first one. It's called page setup dialog. As you see, it shows you the page setup so that you can basically change the margins or select the margins, or make sure you want the portrait orientation or landscape orientation. You want to select the size. Basically, you want to customize the way the page looks like when it's going to be printed, and then you can finalize your selection by pressing OK. This is another standard dialog related to printing a document. It's called print preview dialog. So as you see, it gives you a nice preview. There are ways to zoom in and zoom out to figure out whether you like this way of printing or not. So previewing it for you before you want to print it. The third and last dialog related to printing is the print dialog, standard dialog that you can add to your application. And when you use the show dialog on it, it's going to display a dialog similar to this, and it can allow the user to select the printer and basically select the number of copies or select a range to print. Either you want to print the whole document or print certain pages, and then you can click on print if you want to start printing the document with a given printer and the preferences that you can select in this dialog. So all the standard dialogs that I mentioned, with the exception of print preview dialog, are basically subclasses of the common dialog class. You can see the inheritance tree of, or inheritance chain of common dialog from object, which is the superclass of all classes in C#, to Marshall by ref object, to component, to common dialog. So common dialog is a child of component, and if you want to know like where the form is in this inheritance tree, form will be under object, marshaled by ref object, component, control, scrollable control, container control, and form. So you can think of common dialog and form as cousins, right? The common dialog allows you to use the show dialog on it to basically show the dialog in a modal fashion. But print preview dialog can be shown either modlessly or in a modal fashion. Now that we have seen all the standard dialogs, it's time to see if we can know a little bit more about dialogs so that we can create our own custom-made dialog. The first thing you need to know about dialogs is that the show dialog returns a dialog result, which is an enumerator, and it's going to have a value among one of these, either none or okay or cancel or abort or retry or ignore or yes or no, right? And if you want to access any of these, just say dialog result dot none or dot okay or dot cancel, so on and so forth. And that's basically that dialog result basically is used to exchange message from dialog to the hosting form. So imagine you want to create your own dialog that basically gets three text boxes or three text inputs from user. One is the applicant name, one is the applicant phone number, and one is the loan amount. And then the user has the opportunity of either finalizing and confirming their input, or they can cancel it, right? So you can add a cancel and OK button here. You can add like three labels here, and then the three text boxes here. It's very simple to do this. In a Windows Form application, all you need to do is right-click on the application and add a new form. And the new form would be called, let's say, Form 1, Form 2, Form 3, like different names. You can basically change the text to the loan application. You can change its icon. You can basically drag a label, drop it into this form and call the label applicant name. You can duplicate the label and use it for the other labels. You can, again, search for a text box from dialog from the toolbox, drag it and drop it on this form, and then place them here in a nice fashion, change the size, change the location, make it look nice. Add two buttons, let's call one of them OK, let's call the other one cancel. If you want this form to be displayed like a dialog so that the user can basically close this form by an OK or a cancel button and define or specify its decision through dialog results OK or dialog result cancel, what you need to do is you need to select the whole form that contains all of this form, and choose its accept button property equal to this button, whatever the button name is. If this is one of the buttons that you add from a toolbox to this form, it's going to be called button 1 or button 2 by default. So you can say my form.accept button should be equal to button 1. Let's say this is the button 1, and then the form.cancel button should be equal to cancel button, this one, or it's a button 2. The accept button basically gets or sets the button on the form that is clicked when the user presses the enter key. So when the user presses enter key instead of pressing OK, it's like pressing OK. That means the user wants to finalize or confirm their selection. If the user presses escape button, that's gonna the escape key on the keyboard, then that's equivalent of doing a cancel or clicking on this button, cancel. And one more thing you need to do is for each of the buttons, there would be a dialog result. You should set the dialog result of this button equal to dialog result.ok, and the dialog result of this button to dialog result.cancel.